back to Guitars and Music Tech. Today, it's a special episode. It's been 1 year since we started this podcast, so it's kind of like our anniversary. So I would like to thank everyone who's been listening since the start and continue to listen. A special thank you for you for listening and tuning in. Today's our episode is going to talk about my journey with the DAW. And along the journey, hopefully you will learn a few things may help you in your choice. I started 25 years ago, and my DAW of choice at the time, there wasn't a lot of options. And most affordable for me, I was still a student, it was a Cakewalk. Cakewalk was a sequencer. I think it was around version 3. I remember liking it so much. And it's a MIDI sequencer, and you can record only MIDI information. You cannot record audio. And for you to add some audio to your song or your piece of music, you still had to use a tape machine and sync it with the sequencer by dedicating a one track on your tape machine, which I had was a small Tascam recorder, which I have until today. So usually it's a 4-track tape cassette recorder. So we take one track of those and put a code on it. We used to call it empty time code signal, recorded from the beginning of the tape till the end. And it's basically telling the program, where are you in the tape? Are you in the beginning? Are you in the middle? How fast you're going? So it syncs to the MIDI sequencer. It's all along the song. So if you stopped your tape machine, then the sequencer will know, because the code stopped, that you need to stop. And when you start, it's telling, okay, I'm on number 30. So the code 30, let's say, or whatever number it is, it's not 30. It's going to be telling the sequencer to start at that point in the song. So this is how they used to sync together. Those were the fun times with the multi-track and all that. So you had to spend time to code that one track. And sometimes the code is too loud and it bleeds to the other 3 tracks. So you try to put the louder track just next to that particular coded track, so you don't hear it much at the end. So most musicians at the time had only the 4-track tape machines where they can record their demos or help them to compose their music. It was great. We had some noise cancellation to eliminate the hiss from the tape, which is the Dolby and DBX noise reductions. There was no plugins or emulations that was done on the computer. There's nothing. The software, which is like Cakewalk, is just a sequencer recording MIDI data that is coming from a keyboard. That's all it was doing. And it was like little dots. It appears that the tracks were showing you a dot. But Cakewalk was very special in a way that it will really allow you to do a lot of MIDI editing. It was very, how do I say it? It's like a word processor to be able to modify and search for words and edit them. It was like that, but for MIDI. And it was very powerful at the time, and that was good. And it wasn't cheap. That software costed me around $400 at the time, I remember. And we're talking about 25 years and even more than that. So MIDI was very strong. It was developed in 1983, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. That's what MIDI stands for. And it was the way to communicate between different keyboards and modules. Because at the beginning, everybody had their own digital standards. So if you buy, let's say, a Yamaha keyboard, is not going to communicate with the Korg keyboard or sound module or whatever drum machine it is from, let's say, Roland. So they don't communicate with each other. But when MIDI came out, they all talk the same language. So it was, hallelujah, everybody, I can play 3 keyboards from one and have 3 different sounds, because the sounds were built into the keyboard at the time. The samples were not very common, and you had to really have them in. So the MIDI information is very simple. It's just recording which note are you playing and how fast did you play. That's why they call it velocity, because the faster the note, the louder usually it's going to end. So the speed of how you play that note on the keyboard it's called velocity in physics. So it represents how loud it is. But for musicians, velocity. When you're talking about speed, we're talking about how loud the note is, but that's where it's coming from. It's how fast you are playing that keyboard note. So that's why they call it velocity, and how louder it will be. There was no sensors at the end when you hit the note to detect how hard you played it. Okay, so there's no pressure detections. Later on, the keyboards started to have some kind of polymer underneath where it detects the pressure, how much weight and you're going to put, so that it comes after touch, they call it, so that you can even push it later and increase the volume or do some kind of modulation and modify the sound. So this came a little bit later, not the very beginning of MIDI. There was 127 velocity steps that we will be able to record. A real pianist only can express themselves in two things: how loud you're playing and your timing. There's nothing else. Unlike a violin, for example, or a guitar, for that matter, where you can move and change the pitch of one note to the other continuously. You can't do this on a piano. So when you go from one note to the other continuously, you only had a certain amount of notes, of steps that you can do. But now there's MIDI too, and it's much more advanced, and it went from 120 steps to almost endless steps. The limitation of having 127 distinct velocities is more than enough to express someone's playing, on a keyboard. So that's why it worked really well for so long and so many years, and everybody has MIDI connection. And it was genius that MIDI connection is done with the optics, so there's no real coupling between there's no wires really connected to each other. So they really thought it out, and it really worked very, very well. So after the MIDI sequencer was there and you're just recording on a tape machine and syncing it, well, suddenly we started to see some audio tracks appear. And that changed the name of the sequencer from not just being a sequencer, because now it's able to record audio. And it became the DAW, the Digital Audio Workstation. So that's the birth of the DAW. And finally, we got rid of the syncing thing and the tape and all the problems it causes. But on a computer now, since you're starting to record audio, you would need a sound card. Most PCs had their built-in sound cards, which were not good. So you would need to buy an additional sound card, and there's a big market for these. I remember the one I bought at the time was called the Gina, and it was pretty good. It had a lot of cables coming out, so you can put your instruments in and record, and it was fairly well spec'd. Every sound card is basically an analog to digital converter. So you're taking the continuous analog voice and you're digitizing it. So you need to have a good digitizing chip and to go from analog to digital. And it's the same thing when you're listening to audio, you're transferring from the digital world to the analog world. You also need an analog to digital converter of high quality so that you can really listen properly to what was recorded digitally. So the digital analog and analog to digital converters are very important. I stuck with Cakewalk for a long time until I got to purchase Ableton Live. Ableton Live, I think it was version 4 when I got into it. I loved it. It was amazing. It's like, wow, what a revelation. I loved the idea to be able to record a small segment and it will be looping. And I will go just next to it and record another segment along with it, and it will also be looping. But the first loop could be any length. So there's no relation between these two loops. They keep looping forever. So it was very easy to experiment. Very, very easy. So I would record, let's say I would have a nice little riff on the guitar. I would just put the drum sound, the drum machine for like 2-3 bars, loop it on one track, and then I record my riff. It will be looping, and then I take a bass and experiment with it, and then I take another track and put another experimentation with a melody. Either I sing it or I play it also. And here you go. I can be able in no time having a whole section of just 4 bars being played. I can experiment with it, and I leave it at that. And that was the big problem with live. Taking it from the linear track to being loops got you stuck in just doing loops. So you had no song. You only had different sections that sounds good together because it's based on this particular 4-bar loop that you did, but it's not a song. So you're going from session view, basically where you're recording your loops, to the arrangement view. And then they don't sound connected because they are different parts. So if you did a part, let's say the intro, the verse or the chorus, and then you just try to move them to the arrangement view, there's always a big problem there, and they just don't sound flowing from one to the other. So it wasn't really good in that finishing the song. It was perfect in experimenting, and it was perfect for trying things out. And that's what I loved it. Because if you wanted to do this in a linear way, like regular tracks, like Cakewalk, you open a track, you put guitar on it, and you start recording. So there is no intro unless you decide, okay, I wanted this 4, you have your form ready, and you have the first 4. So you have to record one track, try to loop it, make a return on it, but you already know what you need to do. But with live, you don't know what you need to do. You don't know how many bars you're going to record. You just hit record, decide your metronome, and just play. And when you're done, you stop, and that's your loop. And then you go next to it, and you create a bass. It could be a 4-bar, whether the first part was 8, 16, no matter, who cares, doesn't matter. The second part, and they loop together at different lengths. It doesn't really matter to them. And that's the beauty of it. You can have something that keeps repeating every 4 bars, and the other one is repeating every 16 bar or every 8. So it's good for experimenting. But as I said, at the end, it doesn't give you the full song. So I ended up having tons of loops. I call them seeds, since even before that. So that's what impressed me about live, and that's why I liked it. And live now came with, they added a nice controller to it. It's like an instrument, so you can really record, experiment again with different sounds, different things that you can do that is not doable on a regular keyboard, especially if you don't play keyboard. So the push, the way it's designed, and the buttons that are there, it makes you learn a new instrument. It's basically, I see it as an instrument. But the good thing is it's really good, very well integrated with live. And the whole idea of Ableton Live is to play live, basically. For a composer, it's a good program, but it will limit you, the way I find it. It will limit you to the experimenting and the seeds part. It's not for traditional singer-songwriter. And then the iPhone was released. I love the iPhone. And then what is that? It's called GarageBand on the iPhone. It's opened my mind. I loved GarageBand. It was, wow, this is great. So many sounds to play with. And so I said, okay, what does Apple have? Oh, they have Logic. It was Logic 9 at the time. So I jumped in and changed my computer from a PC to a Mac. I got my first 27-inch Mac and Logic. I didn't buy Logic 9. I just looked at it and I waited until Logic 10 came out. And then I purchased it. It wasn't very expensive. And I still own it since then. It's been a while. I don't really use it, but it's there. So I said, Logic 10 should be that. That is it. I will compose on my phone whenever the urge comes. And then it was an iPad, of course, when it came out, the iPad. And then I will continue on my big 27-inch Mac. That was the plan. So unfortunately, Logic 10, and believe me, I was there since day one when it came out. It was crashing like crazy. It was everything you try and do, it crashes, and that just kills the creativity. Every time there's an interruption, it just doesn't work. So there was a big problem there until they keep updating it, and now of course it's a different story. It's not the same Logic 10 that we got at the very beginning. They fixed it. It's pretty amazing right now. For the price what you get, it's something. And then I wasn't happy with Logic and with Live. I forgot about Live for a long time. I got into it lately at version, I don't know, 8 or 9. I purchased it again, and one Christmas time I was walking around and I thought, okay, when I saw Cubase, and why don't I get into Cubase? It's the first sequencer I've seen before buying Cakewalk, but it was too expensive. I didn't buy it. I decided on Cakewalk. So I said, okay, let's jump the wagon and go to Cubase. Steinberg Cubase. So I did buy Steinberg Cubase and the dongles and everything, Cubase Pro. Now I'm up to version 11. It's the king of kings. It can do anything you want. It's very professional. There's nothing it cannot do. I invested in all those little MIDI connected controllers. I bought them all, though I don't remember what they're called, but they are little modules that you plug them in. And I used to like Groove Agent because it will give you a very quick drummer track that is based on a certain style that will inspire you to play and come up with ideas. And the search continues. I liked Live's way of capturing ideas, and I liked what Logic gave in terms of a drummer, and I liked what Cubase had special, which was chords. You can have automatic chords with one finger on the keyboard, and you can have a chord track that forces everything underneath it, all the other tracks, to follow. So let's say I decided on a certain chord progression, and then I would play something on another track, and I will force it to follow the chord track. So I would play whatever, doesn't really matter, and it changes all the notes so it matches the chords that are decided on the chord track. Live doesn't have that. Logic doesn't have that. But Logic has the drummer, which I liked because I can decide, and I would choose my drummer, and I can control somehow the complexity of that drummer, and I will have an automatic drummer track, because always the drum track was a problem to have instead of just a static loop with a break here and break there, and still it doesn't sound like a drummer. But in Logic, they had someone called the drummer, and they had names. So it was amazing. I love that. So keep searching for a program that would have everything. Is it too hard to have it for composers, so I can have a drummer playing with me, and I can experiment a little bit with the loops, and then I can still have the linear and the chords on top of it with the arrangements, a good arrangements. So I stumbled upon Bitwig. I was looking at Bitwig, wow, and found out, my God, this thing is so amazing. It's beyond everyone else. The people who did it came from Live, and they created it in a more modern way, but it has problems. It was designed specifically to experiment with sound design. So if you're a sound designer, don't look any further. Bitwig is your DAW, so you have to use Bitwig. But then I heard about something called Studio One. So I said, let's have a look at it. There was a video I watched on YouTube, and then I liked it. They said the people came from Steinberg, who created Cubase, are the ones who started Studio One. It's also a German program. So I looked at it. I liked it. It had almost everything, and even a little bit more in some parts. It had a chord track, very flexible, very easy to do. It had loops, not exactly. It had like a note scratch pad that I can experiment with some loops on the side that is not touching the linear or final part that I wanted. So that was kind of limiting a little bit. So I used that, and but in terms of composing, I found it it is fulfilling. It was very easy to use. It's what I'm using right now to record this podcast. Very customizable, straightforward. Everything is click and drag and drop. So if you did something on one track, you want to move it, you drag it, drop it. It's you have to try it yourself to see if it's for you. I kind of liked it, and I'm investing my time into it, and it does the work for me. And in terms of loops, I actually experimented with the Machina. They call it the Machina MK3, which is a little device which has buttons on it, like a drum to play drums, which is based kind of like on loops, like live. So I said, okay, maybe if I can get this inside of Cubase, I can use it to experiment with the loops and stuff. But the audio part was not there. So they just added it a few months ago or a year ago, I don't remember. They added a general audio track to it, but it's still not as easy. And when it's incorporated inside the DAW, like inside of Cubase, it loses a little bit of its functionality. It's still a great machine. I still have it. I still use it. The Native Instruments Machina MK3, beautiful machine. But the software's, unfortunately, as good as it is, it kind of takes time from the creativity. By itself, it's great. So it's still a tool, just like the push, it's a tool in live. It's like an instrument that you can play. So I ended up with, as I said, with the DAW that I'm using right now, which is Studio One from PreSonus. One of the nicest things I like is clicking and dragging an audio track into the chord track. And paf, you've got all the chords appearing in front of you. And that I find really genius. So, and also not only that, once you have, you analyze your chords, you can drag them on a MIDI track and you have them being played. And you can choose any sound you want from that. So even if you get, let's say, an MP3 file, which is a regular song, and you don't know what the chords are, you just drag it into the chord track in Studio One, and you'll get the chords. It will analyze the piece for you and give you the chords. Maybe they're not particularly perfect, but at least they're there, a starting point. And if you drag that track back to a MIDI, then you've got a keyboard playing those chords. So you can modify them either. So it's very versatile. Imagine you're doing this for your own pieces on all the loops that you got. Like you have a small loop, an audio loop playing piano, drag it to the chord track, then drag it back to a MIDI, and you can change the key and have it playing in a different sound. Although you started from an audio piano loop. You see where I'm going with this? So it's very powerful. I don't see any of the other programs doing this, at least not right now. I'm sure they're going to catch up, but I find that also the integration of Melodyne. Melodyne is an editor for audio. It's amazing. Integrated with the Studio One beautifully, so they can analyze differently and have more accuracy in analyzing the notes. So I ended up on that, and so far I'm working with it. It also is unique in the way of the workflow, basically. So after all, music creation long time ago was only limited to people who can read and write music. But today, with the DAWs that we have, it allows you to compose and write music without having to understand maybe anything about music. You just need to know the little fundamentals of it, and you're on your way to creating beautiful music. We're not all fortunate to learn how to read and write music. It's a language like any other language. When I was young, I didn't learn it how to read and write, and I struggled a little bit when I studied music. But I catch up. I have a good understanding of it. I try to simplify things when I teach it. And that's what I will be trying to do in the future on this podcast. We'll take some simple things and I'll simplify them. And you will see that it is not what it looks like. I find that sometimes musicians make it look very complicated and makes music theory too complicated, especially when we come to jazz. And I don't see it that way at all. For me, it's very, very simple. You just need to look at the basics. You look at the skeletons. You look at the principles. I was fortunate to learn from great teachers. They taught me very well. I learned the classical way, and I learned the jazz way and the modern way of composing. And sometimes I was the only one who's taking courses on how jazz musicians and jazz composition was done, along with also classical music. And jazz teachers were saying, I don't know who did what and discovered what. Well, it was been done hundreds of years ago in classical music, but with not the same naming. But it was already done and used. There's no communication between classical music and jazz musicians. Unfortunately, I was a blues rock player in the middle of this. So I don't play jazz. I maybe pretend to a little bit sometimes, but I'm not a jazz player, and I'm not a classical player either. But I was sitting in those classes and those courses and listening to both of them. But I'm still a blues player. But it was fun to hear the points of views of each one of them. How classical music is very, very strict. And jazz kind of like think a little bit of themselves, since they understand music a little bit more than the classical player, which is sometimes true, sometimes is not. It depends on the music and depends on the player. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed my little story of the DAW and my history starting from the very beginning. It was a long road for 25 years until we got to where we are right now, and we have AI. So AI is going to be the future things going up. Hopefully one day we'll have a DAW that will just listen to what you play and just transform it to you. You don't have to do anything. That will be the best, right? So until next time, take care of yourself, and thank you, and goodbye.